All right, nobody's asleep yet, so that's good. Because I had that cake and it was so good, I thought, you know what would be really good after this cake? A nap. Actually, all the food was good. It wasn't just the cake. I'm going to try to do this without breaking it. I don't need your sound guy mad at me. He's too nice. All right, I think we can make it work here.
Lower?
That should be, well, a little bit higher. Yeah, beautiful. Okay. We'll get through a little bit, and then you guys will have to stand up and stretch for the sky and reach your toes. I can't reach my toes, I'll just be honest. I'm past that stage in my life where I can reach my toes. I look at them, and I appreciate them. And I'm actually to the point in my life, whenever I bend down, I think, what else can I do while I'm down here? So, okay. Well, you guys have heard, if you were here last night, you heard a couple of things. I'm just going to rehash a little bit about me so you know who I am. I have a wife. She's dealt with me for 26 years. I have a 22-year-old and a 19-year-old. Pastor for 20 years, up until August of 2021. And we were determining what was next. I actually worked myself out of a job. And we had some opportunities, and I decided, you know what, I enjoy seeing congregations thrive, and God's given me the blessing to be able to lead 3, almost, well, I guess you could say 4, that have done it, that why don't we launch our own company and work with schools, churches, the other faith-based organizations that want us to grow. So we launched Faith Development Partners. So it's been an interesting journey. The next year, 2022, I wrote the book that we're basing this off of, Leading a Congregation to Relevance, based on a model that I've been working on now for 9 years and working off of. So my journey has been really kind of fun. The last, going on 5 months, I've actually been the head of school for Deer Lake School in Vancouver, British Columbia. They brought me on site. They contracted with me for 1 year to come and work on site to help them to find out what the problems were, what needed to be fixed, to help set the groundwork, work with the city for expansion. And so that's been interesting. And it's given me a nice, complete dose of Adventist education from the inside out. I've always supported it, but now I get to really see even more so how it works. People usually want to know, is this a theory or did you practice this? So I can tell you, and I'll share with you as we go through this, that it is not a theory. It has been practiced, and I have the war scars to prove it. Because when you bring about change, it's difficult. It is difficult to be a change agent. But I am so passionate about reaching people for Jesus that I will love the people even as they challenge me for change and say we can do this together and help them to see a vision about what God wants, what he wants to accomplish, what he wants his congregations to be. Before we go in further to that, I want to share a reflection with you, give you something to think about. I love the story of the Israelites, of being in captivity for 400 years, a little bit more. Moses shows up after his long journey out in the wilderness, comes back with Aaron, and he says, you're going to be delivered. It doesn't go so well. They watch as 10 plagues take place. The Israelites do. And then finally, they're delivered. They walk out with gold and jewelry and treasures and everything. The Egyptians were so glad to see him go. They said, take whatever you want. We'll just go. They go down. They wander their way to the Red Sea, mountains on both sides, Red Sea in front of them, and they see a few days later the Egyptians coming because Pharaoh's changed his mind. What were we thinking? And the people, after they've seen after they've witnessed, after they've experienced deliverance, they start crying out to Moses, "What have you done? Just take us back. You brought us out here to kill us. What are you going to do? We're going to die." Wah, wah, wah. And they've just been delivered. We're not like that, fortunately. We're too knowledgeable about God to ever be concerned that what God provided in the past, we know he's going to do it in the future, right? Moses is there, as you see, and God tells him what to do. He, right there, used by God, God's going to prove to them right now, you can stay here, or you can move forward in faith. You can do that. Something miraculous will happen. So here's what I've learned. There's something really to key in on. Change is painful. Would you agree? And it's hard to change your diet, right? I had a triple bypass going on 3 years ago. I had to change my diet because I don't really want another one. It was too hard to recover. It was painful. But I learned this. Change is painful. Growth is painful. But you know what's even worse? Stasis, or remaining still, is deadly. Had the Israelites stayed still right there and not gone across the Red Sea, they would have died. Would have been no, but there was a choice. You can go back to what you had, and you're just going to be enslaved, and you're going to die that way. You can stay right where you're at. You'll be wiped out by the Egyptians, so you can go forward. So they go forward. Moses leads the way, and they find themselves there around Mount Sinai, and it's a very desolate type place. And if you look at the scriptures, you look into Exodus, and you see the timing. They'll say what day of the month it was. It's about 45 days after they've been delivered. They've been delivered from Egypt. They've come through the Red Sea. 45 days later, they're sitting around complaining about what they don't have and saying, "We wish you'd just take us back to Egypt so we can have the leach pots, so we can have the food." It's interesting how in 45 days they forgot the beatings and the 16 to 18-hour days of work and being constantly told what to do by the Egyptians. And 45 days after being delivered, they're complaining and they want to go back because they were so concerned about going back that they couldn't see what God wanted to take them to. And this is actually a picture off the Sea of Galilee in Israel. And I say that this is a lot what changes. So when I've worked with congregations, when we've done something as simple as changing a method in the worship service, in 2-3 weeks, "Pastor, we want to put it back. We want to put it back." And I say, "No, we do it for 12 weeks. 12 weeks later, people won't care anymore. They'll accept it." Change is hard. Doing something different is difficult. In fact, I say that, if I can get this to work, the most difficult thing to do is something different. We are creatures of habit. Now, my wife says that I'm a creature of habit, but I'm not, because I like change. And I've had more cars in my lifetime than most people, not in my short lifetime, I've had over 100 vehicles that I've owned personally and driven. My wife said, "Why do you have to change cars every 6 months, 9 months?" I said, "Because I get bored. I want something else." So I don't mind change, except if it messes with my comfort zone. And then when somebody messes my comfort zone, then I resist the change. So to do something different, what God was challenging the Israelites, He provided them a promise. And sadly enough, that even when they came to the promised land the first time, Mount Sinai, they had all the promises. They had the 10 Commandments given down to them, and the promises that God was making to them. God takes them to the promised land, and they send over the spies. 10 come back and say, "It can't be done." 2 say it can be, and the people bowed to the 10 who said it couldn't be done, and they spent 40 years in the wilderness, and anybody over the age of 20 died because they couldn't change. They couldn't see the promise. They couldn't see where the possibilities could be. So that's kind of, in some ways, what we're talking about today about how to get to a change in a deliberate can't even say it right. I'm so full of chocolate cake that I can't even say my words right. With a strategic methodology to get there. So I will talk to you about that. And again, it is an open conversation. Probably might want to have a mic so the people who are watching it on video later or streaming right now can see it and hear your questions. But we'll start with this one. It's kind of a rhetorical question. What is North Bay's purpose? And I would argue that the purpose for this congregation is no different than the purpose for all of God's congregations around the world. And that would be this: to go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. Would you agree that that would probably be the defining purpose of a congregation? That was the final, next to the final words that Jesus gave to the disciples. You are my disciples, and this is what you're supposed to go do. He didn't go say build big buildings. He didn't say go build traditions and create monuments to yourself. Don't get festered into your little place and tell people you want to know more about Jesus, you come see us. He said go, make disciples, and baptize. But then John writes even further in 1 John 1:4, that which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we've looked at and our hands have touched, this we proclaim concerning the word of life. The life appeared. We have seen it, testified to it, and we proclaim to you the eternal life which was with the Father and has appeared to us. We proclaim to you what we have seen and heard, so that you may also have fellowship with us, and our fellowship is with the Father and his Son, Jesus Christ. We write this to make our joy complete. You can't share Jesus if you aren't in love with Jesus. You agree? We talk about, I remember when I got engaged to my wife, I called everybody that I knew that I wanted to tell them. I called my parents, I called my grandparents, I called my sisters, I went over to the house to tell some other people. I'm engaged. I was so happy to tell people about this woman that I was getting married to. The people who have a connected, peaceful, joyful relationship with Jesus can't help but share Jesus with somebody else. And that's what the fellowship, that's what this congregation, if it was humming along at peak for the car guys, running on all 8 cylinders, and maybe you like a Ferrari V10 or V12, humming along on all those cylinders, it would be a congregation that's vibrant and thriving, making disciples, sharing Christ every day of the week, wherever the congregation members are. And they come in here on the weekends, during the week, to study, to be taught, to be refreshed, to be reconnected, and they go back out because they said, we can't help but tell you about what we've experienced, so our joy will be complete. We will be unhappy as a congregation if we are not letting other people experience the joy of Jesus. How's that sound? So that leads to a question about relevance. Now, I've had some people say, oh, no, Pastor. We do not need to be relevant, because they have a false idea of relevance, okay? So if you look on here, relevance, there's popular culture down there, and there's the church up on the top, and the guy down below says, if you just jump right in, you'll be relevant to us. And so there are some congregations that have said, if we water down our message, and if we put the most popular coffee out in the foyer, and if we bring in the donuts and we do all that, that's not relevance. Relevance is, you are at a point in your life, does Jesus reach you and love you where you're at? That's being relevant. Is the gospel relevant? The other thing, those are just fluff. The other things, they don't really make a difference. That doesn't include relevance. But I've been to congregations of other faiths, and I'm thinking, I don't see any difference here than a rock concert, other than the fact that they just pop out Jesus once in a while out of their mouth. I don't see anybody challenging them to see Jesus as he is, the way, the truth, and life. I don't see them challenging people to grow as disciples. See, many congregations say, just accept Jesus, and they are happy to leave you just the way you are for the rest of your life. That's not discipleship. Discipleship is growth. So relevance is what matters. And what does relevance look like? In my book, I write relevance as this: a congregation that makes a significant impact on individual lives and the community it exists in without condition. By exhibiting, what's that word? What does exhibiting mean? Showing. By exhibiting, by showing the timeless message of the gospel while ministering within the context of the culture and community it exists in. Now, you know what's fascinating? Pastor, do you have your copy of your demographic study with you? Pardon me? Why don't you bring it? I'm going to have you read a few things off just to kind of give a glimpse, because this is really key. You'll always have a flat plane of the gospel message, but then you have to determine as a congregation, what does our community, what will be the way that we reach into the community? Who are the people that we're dealing with? What's their social economic class? I have seen in some cases where somebody tries to preach or do Bible study or do something that's at a 10th grade level when the average reading level of that community was probably a 3rd or 4th grade. And then the people just stare at you and look at you. And I've seen it the opposite, where you dumb it down and the people are like, they're intellectuals, so they go somewhere else where the gospel is more intellectual. So you have to find out your community. We can be if we're tone deaf with our methods of sharing the gospel, we will turn people off and turn them away rather than reaching them and being relevant to where they're at. So that's one of the things that I'm going to have Pastor read to you here in a minute. Tom and Joni Schultz say true spiritual relevance is reflecting God in the matters at hand. When a crisis is happening in your neighborhood or in your community, are you reflecting Christ? Are you reflecting God? One of the tough things that we've gone through in the last few years was COVID. Some people did not handle it well, other people did. But as a congregation, as Christians, something sad happened. We allowed ourselves to be political about it in many ways. And I'm going to tell you, the last thing Christians should do is be openly, take a stand one way or another. What you do is your conviction, and it should be private. But I had pastoral colleagues of mine take a stand on Facebook. I'm anti-vax. I'm for vax. And half their congregations would never showed back up again. Instead of saying, you need to pray and answer your conviction personally. Okay, I'm going to let you share some of the core things that we've learned. How's that sound? Yep, starting right there.
Okay, this was a research made on a radio of 20 minutes surrounding our church.
20-minute drive.
20 minutes drive. I requested it to avoid Panama City Beach because of the Panama City Church was there. However, we have Lynn Haven, we have a little bit of Callaway, and we have north going like northwest, like going to Ebro in that area. So we have only, for example, just 32% is high school graduate. 34% have some college education. 24% has a bachelor's degree. There is a 9% that not even has a high school diploma. So if we see that, we can say that from our population, more than the 75% don't have a bachelor's or graduate degree. More than 75%. Some of them has done something, but it's not our community. The household size is an average of 3 people, thinking on the houses that are empty or people who live by themselves. However, something interesting is that the population on this area has grown from 2000 to 2023, at least from 81,000 people to 95,000 people. So you have like 15,000 new people moving into this community or to this area that has been researched. The average on the age on the community is, you mentioned that yesterday, is 40 years old. So the community is at least 15 years younger than the average in the church community. We have, for example, a Hispanic population that is small, but the expectation is that it will be the 8% in 4 years from now. And the Black African American population is going to be the 14% in 2024, so it will keep growing. However, the majority of our community, more than the 60%, is white American. For example, some information about the prices of the houses. The median house value in this area, maybe that's going to be good news for some of you, is $266,000. It's not cheap. To live in this area is not cheap. And the average spend in mortgage in this community is $10,200 per house. And the rent around the community is almost $1,000 per month. I'm saying between the rich and the poor is an average of all this. We have 59% of the employment of this community is white collar or office work. Then the 25% is blue collar and 16% is service oriented. More information?
Yeah. Cool.
We have, for example, the 45% of our community has a dog. Just the 26% of them says they have a cat. That's important because that's something people care about. People have dogs, and I can see here some of the people from the church that I know have dogs. If you have to do something evangelistic, put a dog there. It will be more likely that it will attract people than a cat, even though I like cats, or I have cats because life happens.
I mean, think about it. What if you, think about it.
It's an example.
Yeah. I'm just throwing stuff out. I'm not saying you should go do it.
Dog park.
You gotta think. Exactly.
If we had Sunday a dog park for the community, it's an example.
If you like cats, have a cat park. I don't know.
But we may have more people with a dog park than with a dog. That's why I'm sharing this information. That's what makes sense for me. Because 45% of the population, that's a huge amount of people, have dogs. And it's true because I have visited some of the people here. Now, our community don't invest too much in computer. Just $195 annually. They invest in computers and hardware. However, they invest more than $6,000 in healthcare and more than $2,900 in eating out. So for our community, eating out is part of the culture. It's a way we can reach them, doing things where we can eat out with them, according to the statistics. People who do exercise, completely 29%, somewhat 38%, people who agree. Disagree, 22% says that somewhat disagree, and 11% say that they never do exercise. Healthy eating habits, completely agreed, only 12%. Agree somewhat is a big amount of people that feels they eat healthy, 49%. That's good and bad. Sometimes it's that they feel they eat healthy.
Yeah, but here's something interesting. Again, you don't want to read too much into these things, but you start pulling it out. And you hear people say, from what the statistics are showing us, that there's a high level of money spent on healthcare costs, right? Okay? Then there's some people that have this wavering opinion about eating healthy. Well, now you connect it with your neighborhood and you say, we're going to offer you ways you're going to advertise it, how to lower your health costs by eating better or something similar, how to use preventative health and habits to lower your healthcare costs. And now you start reading these demographics and you start seeing now, because the idea is, how do we give people what they need rather than what we think they need?
Now, something interesting. Do you attend religious services regularly? 23% said yes. 16% says yes somewhat. However, a 43% says that they don't, disagree completely, 43% of this community. And 18% says that they disagree somewhat, so sometimes they show up. So we have 60%, 65% of our population that is not coming to church. Now, I will make emphasis in that because when I came, one of our churches, people told me, Pastor, we're in the South, everybody goes to church. But I'm trying to do evangelism, everybody goes to church. 65% of our community is not attending church at all or regularly. Let me see another interesting thing. We have.
What's that? No, church.
No, church in general.
Yep.
Church in general. There are more data, but they are smaller there.
Yep.
So, for example, household income. In our community, we have, let me try to present it in a, the 22% makes from 50 to 74K yearly. We have a big amount of people that is lower than that. However, we have a few who make 11% makes 75 to 99K. 18% makes from 100 to 150K. And then another small 10% makes more than that. The majority of our people makes less than 49%. I would say 40% of the community. So 40% make less, but the rest have a middle household income that we can relate that. Maybe unemployment, no. According to the statistics, unemployment is not the problem in the community. You have people who is poor, but the unemployment here is less than the 4%. So a lot of people say that they have a job. So maybe when we approach them with evangelism, it's not the lack of job. Maybe it's how they use the money or something like that.
Yep. Well, and I would encourage that study just gets disseminated in your next board meeting a couple times. In fact, here's an example, right? You know, it's back to my example of my definition of a congregation that's relevant is this. So let me just kind of get an idea. A 1,700 square foot home with a basement. How much would that sell for around here? For sale. If you were to buy one, 1,700 square foot on the top, 1,800, 325. Okay, so here's just to get, again, you work in the context of your community. I've been up in Vancouver for the past 5 months. And the school I'm leading, we bought the house across the street. 1,700 square feet, 1,300 square foot on the bottom. And it cost 2.1 million Canadian. That's 1.6 million US dollars. So the people that are moving into the area around that school and the people moving around the area of the church, they make a lot of money. So you reach them differently. Now, I know some people might cringe. A dog lover might smile. So I go to, the first week I'm there, I go to the Vancouver church, the big one. And what do I see? I smile, I laughed, and I'm like, I want to move here and bring my dog. There's dogs in church sitting next to people, and these are not service dogs. These are people's pets. They bring them to church because people have dogs everywhere. So, you know, they say as long as your dog is housebroken, bring him to church. We don't care. So you're ministering to people where they're at in the culture. So that's why you have to know, that's why part of the statement of relevant congregation is knowing your culture and your community so that you can minister to them. Look, the gospel message will not change, right? But the delivery method needs to change. How we're going to present it and get it to people so that we can start having these conversations. Okay, let's go to the crux of what we need to talk about here for the next little short of an hour. The congregational development model. Now, I have long been fascinated by the pyramids. He's become a good friend of mine, Scotty Baker. He's at Andrews, and he is a archaeologist. He has been asked, it's been awesome. He posts pictures all the time. He's been asked to go on significant excavations of Egyptian tombs of the pharaohs. And he's been able to be a part of some of the discoveries. And he was last year, one of the trips that they were on. It was the first time that pictures had ever been taken of this tomb, 3,000 years old. And he was there to take the pictures. Is that cool? But I've been fascinated by the pyramids. How were they built, right? And up until recently, up until the last couple of years, they thought that the blocks were drugged from different places, formed and brought, and they would build them. Turns out that it appears that they actually poured the blocks for the pyramids on site. They actually brought the materials in the water and poured them right there. So it took a while to figure that out. I say that to you because it's fascinating, because the method of how a pyramid works, how it's built, how it's structured, has something to do with the congregational development model. And you can go ahead now, Pastor, and pass that out to everyone. You're going to see it on here, and you're going to actually now have it in hand. And it's a good thing you do, because the green is not showing up very well on here, or the lettering on the green. So just as a context, in 2015, I got to do a sabbatical with Potomac Conference. They gave me 2 months paid to go on and do whatever I wanted. And they said, but you have to come back with something spiritual and applicable in your church. So I leave. We go out west. We get a fifth wheel and a nice diesel truck. You haven't reached full man card until you've owned a diesel truck. And it was great. My wife let me buy one just for the trip. I felt like a real man driving my diesel crew cab around, driving through the West. We went to Zion, Bryce, Grand Canyon, Tetons, Yellowstone, all the way around. But during that time, I kept praying, God, I want to do something a little further in my ministry, and I started working on this. And over the next few years, I started to take and structure it for a purpose. I'll tell you what that purpose is here in a second. But now, I hope I'm not going to offend anybody with bringing up this individual here. But this is Nick Saban, who retired here just about 2-3 weeks ago from Alabama. I'm a Bama fan. I always liked Paul Bear Bryant. And I thought he had 6 championships. And then Nick Saban comes, and in 17 seasons, he made a lot of people grit their teeth and yell obscenities at their TV when they would get beat. But in 17 seasons, he won 6 championships. That's more than 33% of the seasons he was here. I mean, no coach does that anymore. 1, maybe 2. And he only lost 29 games in 17 seasons. 29 games in 7. He's considered one of the greatest coaches now of all time. But how? How did he do that? He has 7 national championships total, because he won 1 with LSU. How does he do it? How do you reach the pinnacle consistently? He has a system. It's very fascinating. But he talks about it here. He talks about in 1998, he was coaching Michigan State, and they were going to play Ohio, and Ohio was supposed to win by 21 points. He said there's probably this one really memorable game that changed the whole dynamics of the psychological approach we use to motivate teams. And it happened when we played at Ohio State in 98. They had been number 1 all the way through, and we were 4-5 and not a very good team. We decided to use the approach that we're not going to focus on the outcome. We were just going to focus on the process of what it took to play the best football you could play, which was to focus on that particular play as if it had a history and life of its own. What was the key? I highlighted it for you just in case. Focus on the process. And every player that has ever played for Nick Saban and all the coaches that came from him, anybody heard of Kirby Smart, who now coaches Georgia? He's taken that same process. Lane Kiffin, he's done the same thing. And they say, we're focused on the process. See, everybody says, I want to win a national championship in college football. And everybody focuses on the national championship. Saban says, no, we're going to focus on this practice today, that if we focus on this practice and execute it correctly, will be just one thing that we'll do well before tomorrow when we go to practice, and we'll focus on this practice well. And then if we focus on all of these, making these things the best that they can be, the outcome will likely be a national championship. And he was proven correct 33% of the time. Nobody likes a complete winner, so it's probably nice that he gave other teams an opportunity to win. But I've taken, as you look at, you have it in your hand as well. This is just an overview. I'll kind of walk you through some things here in a little bit. But I put it together with the same thought process. You'll see that there's 4 color codes. And it breaks down like this. Green is what? Yep. Red is? Yep. Orange? Blue? Yes. And together, they are fundamentals, process thinking. These are things that we do, that we can do and undertake as a congregation. The whole encompassing message, is to share Christ with the world around us. To live and breathe the gospel. To provide opportunities to be relevant in sharing God with people who need to hear what God is about. His love and His grace and His mercy. And to start people on this process of discipleship. So I took, this is all just, I keep working it, I put it in my congregations and keep working it, and I started to see results. So I'm going to somewhat walk you through it. If you look on the bottom, you'll see there's 6 blocks, then it goes to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The idea and principle, the reason why I talk about the pyramid, anybody build houses in here? Or ever built a house? Has anyone in here ever been successful putting your roof on first? How do you build a house? Where do you start? You start with the foundation. Yeah. Now, I actually did see a story several years ago where this guy wanted to prove that you could build a house from the top down. And so he put like stilts underneath the framing for the roof, and he built the roof, and then he started building the walls, and then so he tried to, it was a disaster. He proved it really couldn't be done. So there's a reason why you start with the base first. It's the same reason why, as we go through this real quick, why you start with the bottom. You see, the ultimate goal for a congregation is to be exponential. That's why it's at the top. Ultimately, you want to disciple more people, to grow the kingdom, and have your congregation become so significantly in number that you have to go build another congregation and another congregation and another congregation, because that's the commission, to go make disciples and to baptize. It's not to hoard people into this building, but to say, where is God taking us next? And maybe it's another congregation or it's a campus, whatever the case might be. But exponential is the outcome. The problem is we focus on the outcome as our thing all the time, rather than focusing on the fundamentals that will eventually get us there. So when I counsel and talk with pastors, and I've done so myself, and I tell them, when you've come into a new congregation, or maybe you want to revitalize it, there's 2 things, maybe 3, that you should focus on, and not focus on anything else for your first part of your time there. Preach Christ-centered sermons, and go visit your people. Most pastors today don't want to go visit. And they give you a lot of reasons why they don't want to go visit. Bottom line is, there's numerous reasons, but the bottom line is, it's not a priority. There's other things that they're told are more important than going to visit. So when I was going to Courthouse Road Church in Richmond in 2015, my mentor told me, he said, Dean, I'm going to challenge you to go visit the people. Watch what it does. It's a church that was dying. It had on a good Sabbath, it had 60 people. The building was outdated. It had never been renovated in, I think when I got there, it was 24, 25 years. It was baby blue on the walls, and ugly carpet with stains. The main sanctuary was phase 1, and they never got past it. So it served as the sanctuary and the fellowship hall. There was one, they could tell you what the food stains were. One of them was a large spaghetti stain of sauce that had sat in the carpet. So I got there, and I'm a fixer. I look at everything, and I said, I'm not going to change one thing. I'm not going to talk about anything. I'm just going to go visit the people. So I was scheduled to be there on February 15. And I called my assistant that was going to be working with me, and I said, I want you to create a sheet that allows me to go visit people on Sabbath afternoon and Sunday in hour-and-a-half blocks. People started to fill it in. In the first 100 days, I visited 34 families. They had said previous, this church doesn't change, it doesn't do anything, it never has any momentum, it's been dying, there's probably not minimal hope for it. People have gone to the other churches and they're not coming. I was there 18 months before we took a call to go to Southwestern Adventist University, and we went because my kids needed to be in a stable academy. In 18 months, they renovated the facilities, $150,000 debt-free. They went from 60 to around 140, 145 people in attendance. They had tripled their baptisms from the 5 years previous. They had active discipleship classes, community-focused, doing many things in the community. And they had changed their worship service. They had changed their outlook. They had changed their methodologies. And when I left, I never would have believed it. In fact, people say, you did that. I said, I didn't do it. I was just there. I was just watching God just do things. It's just amazing. But somebody has to be the person that says it's possible. And when I left, I talked to the head elder, and I said, he had been head elder in churches for 30 years, and he said, I've never seen anything like it. And I said, what do you attribute it to? He said, well, two things, the Holy Spirit and your visits. Because he said, you came to visit people before you did anything, and people said, we trust this guy. And so when you stood up and said, God wants to take you on a path you've never been on before, are you willing to go? They were like, yeah, let's just do it. We trust this guy. So we were able to do and become relevant. And they're still relevant. They're still doing these things. I keep track of them. I left there in 2016. They're still doing it. They didn't quit because I left. They kept doing it because they owned it. It was their thing. It was God's thing in them. So I had made visiting a priority. The second thing I did was I preached Christ-centered sermons. People, when a guest walks through the door, they can hear about politics on TV. They can hear about your favorite food and what you think about opinions. What they want to know is, how is Jesus relevant to me today and all the things I'm going through? I feel rejected, despised, hopeless, hapless, helpless. What can you do for me? What can Jesus do for me? When I walk in the door and I sit in these chairs, I want to hear about Jesus. The Holy Spirit brought me here to hear about Jesus and the hope of the gospel. That's being relevant. So I made that a point. And then the third thing, I crept up into the operational part, the blue. From the very get-go, I would stand up and say, man, God desires for this congregation to be a thriving, healthy, disciple-making congregation, changing lives and winning people to Christ and changing the outcome of their life for eternity. Do you want to be a part of a thriving, healthy, disciple-making congregation? People are like, yeah, I want to do that. And I'd get excited about it. So, man, you know what it'll look like? It's going to disrupt your world. It's going to make you crazy, and you're going to love it, every second of it. There's going to be times you're going to say, I don't want to change, but we'll get through it, and we'll move on. And when we see people coming in and we see the joy of Christ on their face because they experience what you've already taken for granted, you're going to be like, wow, we got to keep doing this. When you go out in the community, I just kept every week painting a consistent picture of what God wanted to do in that congregation. And then we started to do some other things. Now, those three things, if a pastor or a leader of a congregation didn't do anything else, if they did those three things, I believe they would make a difference. But then we started, and we moved to different directions, and this is a big one. If you move to the right on your chart, the second orange box over, what does it say? Say it out loud, people. Congregational management. Does that mean that the pastor comes and checks out to see what you're eating? Like, I got to manage my people? No, it doesn't mean that at all. It means, do I have a system in place to track my guests, to communicate, to know that? Do you have a system in place here at North Bay? Okay. So I'm giving you different tips, and you can try out different things, but the one that I use, recommend, and has given me the most success, the first component is absolutely free, and it's called Planning Center Online. When you go on, and Pastor, it's free. So you don't even have to go to the board to get permission, because the board would always say yes to free. And you go on, and you start with this lovely couple right here. And I forgot your name. Billy, and, all right. And you put Billy and his last name, you put his phone number and his email, and if he wants to smile and give you a picture, you put that on there, boom. And then you put Sheila, and you put hers on there separate, and then you merge them, they're a family. And then any kids that go to that, you put the kids underneath there that are under the age of 18. Now, you say, well, that's just great, so what? Okay, now let me tell you where it really makes a difference. John Doe comes in the back door, front door, over here, and they come in for the first time. Right now, are you taking it by a card? Do you have them write down on a card? How are you capturing them? Okay, so who's a greeter in here? Who's done greeting? All right, Sheila, I'm going to use you as an example. Are you semi-good at technology? Okay, so they come in the door. Let me get it out here. And when you go Planning on Center online and you download the people, you can download a free app called Church Center, and you just tell people to look up North Bay, Seventh Adventist Church. But you are the greeting, and Mr. John Doe and his wife walk in, and you say, welcome, I'm glad you're here today. Have you been here before? No. Would you mind doing me a quick favor? Get your phone out real quick. I got something fun that I want you to do. And you put the QR code, and they scan it, and it opens up. It says, welcome to North Bay Adventist Church. Please give us your first name, last name, email, and phone number. Okay? As soon as they hit submit, guess what it does? It populates the people portion of Planning Center Online. I mean, we're talking within 30 seconds. Now, here's where it gets even better. You have a system set up, and you have a hospitality committee, and you have a sweet little lady who is really good at sending out note cards. And you can set her up or him up that the next day they get a trigger that shows up in their email. It says, John Doe and his wife came, note card sent, send note card. And she sends out the note card and she clicks done, and the flow has been set up then that it tells Pastor, John Doe and his wife came, the card has been sent, would you please call them within 24 hours? And then he gets it, and he calls, and he clicks done, and then it shows up that they're a guest, and all the things have been done. Then they come back in 2 weeks, and Sheila's at the door, or maybe somebody else at the door, and they said, we were here before. Oh, what's your name? And you have the iPad with Planning Center Online. You say, boom, because you can look it up with just the first couple letters. It says, oh, John Doe. Click. And then there's a trigger that goes to the pastor, said they were here. This is their second time here. Now we do something special for them. And the other thing that it does is as you're doing your Bible study and as you're doing church, you can, as a deacon, or you can have a designated person do it. Yep, they're here, they're here, they're here. And you start building a pattern. Then you recognize, oh, so-and-so hasn't been here for 3 weeks. I need to make a phone call. I need to make a visit. Another step, you can get a Dymo printer and put it out there, and you can say one of the hardest things to do is names. You walk in, it's Laura, right? So Laura walks in, she can go right up to the iPad, click, Laura, there it is, boom, prints it off, slaps it on, and everybody knows this is Laura. But you can put a little logo next to it that will show that the person is a visitor. And then you can walk up and you can call people, hey, Billy. How do you know my name? Oh, well, glad you're visiting with us today. How do you know that? So it's membership management. You want to send communications out. but it's a great way to build community and foster community. Because what do people want? They want to feel like they're known, that they're included, and they've not been forgotten. Yes?
I'm an Adventist, and I have made a mission to stop the coldness of the Adventist church. Like, I travel all over the country for work, and so I visit a lot of churches. And I can tell you right away the climate of the church. But I was just working in Cincinnati, and I normally went home on the weekend.
Here, I'm going to let you use this thing.
I decided I would attend one of the churches near me so I could sleep in a little bit later because I was working a night shift at a hospital. And I went to this church. Somebody greeted me at the basement level, snowy, cold day, greeted me at the basement level, said, "Hey, can I get you to sign our kiosk?" I'm like, "Kiosk? Oh, no. What a commitment," right? So anyway, they took me up there. They had me put it in myself, so there was no mistakes in my email or whatever. I put it in, didn't think much of it. And I stayed for the service, loved the service, left, drove 2.5 hours home. And before I got home, the pastor called me and prayed with me. And it really, really, really had a huge impact on me. And I love that church, and I went back 4 more times before I left. Like, I made a point to go to church there versus go back home and go to church where it still was icy cold.
Wow.
Yeah,
See?
makes a difference.
And what's the feeling that it gave you?
Cared about.
You were cared about.
My name, and you remembered it.
Yeah.
So I saw them.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what the best part is? That part's free. I mean, you could do it next, you could start next week. You can put the, invest in a couple of things. You can even use the Amazon 7-inch tablet for $49.99. You don't have to use an iPad. You can invest $50 for a tablet. You don't even have to do that if you're not ready to do that. You just, you get it set up, you have it on your greeters' phones, you have the Church Center app, and you just have people scan it, and you can start. So, several years ago, the Beltsville Church, which is outside Washington, D.C. in Maryland, they got challenged by their church consultant, and the church consultant asked them a question. How many people on a given Sabbath visit? And they said, I don't know, because we don't think we're getting everybody. So they put a system into place. They said for 3 months, 1 quarter, we're going to track. We're going to be deliberate. They had 88 guests in 3 months. And they said, how many guests have walked through our door, we didn't know it, they went back out, and they never heard from us again. And the rule of thumb is this. Listen to this really carefully. You have, for optimal response, 36 hours for them to hear from you. That's why the pastor called you so fast. You say, well, what, doesn't the card count? No. 24 hours is for the pastor to call. The card will end up being a follow-up in the mail. And it can have an appropriate $5 gift card. If you just don't think Starbucks is appropriate, then put something else in there. It's something that when they go to grab an iced tea or something, Chick-fil-A card, whatever, they say, oh, it was the North Bay. They gave us this. I need to go back and see them. So, but you capture them, and just exactly what you said. I was cared for. I was not an afterthought. You will find, see, these are some, this is why I said you start here. And you say, well, Pastor, why does that matter? You know why? Because you want to go up, as you go up your chart, what do you see when you go up? You start to see community connections, decisions and discipleship, education ministry, which I call evangelism. And you say, oh, no, Pastor, we want to get to that. And I said, well, you want to get to that, but you haven't even figured out how to capture the people that come into your church. And I'm not saying you guys, I'm saying in general. That's what I tell congregations. You got to figure out how to capture the basic before you get to the other.
This is my 3rd time here, and I've never signed a guest book.
So she said this is her 3rd time here, and she's never signed a guest book.
And I stayed for potluck twice.
And potluck twice.
I know
Yep.
some people's names, but
Yeah.
nobody's had me sign the guest book.
Yeah. So, but better will be when you can do it because it's quick and easy. People use their phone all the time. And if people say, well, I'm not quite comfortable giving you my phone number, just say, just give us your email address. But most people won't. And I always joke about it. When I've done even pastoring, and I'll say, hey, leave me your phone number so I can stalk you. And they're like, that's funny. I said, no, I was being serious. We're going to get you back here. And then they laugh. And they, okay, fine, we'll leave you the phone number. So, but again, this is, yes.
Something that happens with guest books, after So it will be very different if she has somebody handling her the guest book. She will remember the person, but if you have a book there, it's not appealing. So that's why I believe that the most important thing of what you're saying is not the software, it's not the system, it's the intentionality of the people doing it.
Yep. Well, I'll push back on you a little. I understand. That part I agree with. But I'm telling you, the ease of getting it into a contact management, it's the ease. In 30 seconds, it's there, it's populated, and you have a flow set up. Boom, they're going to get a card, they're going to get a phone call. And then also being able to use it for kids. Here's another thing, part of it. It's just another side part, but it's an important part. You may get large enough here where you say to a parent that brings a child that wants to leave them there, we need your child's name, and then when you come back, you need to check them out. Because we live in a world of sickos that are out there, and they can easily come in and start preying on your kids. Once you start growing and kids come in here, they say, oh, and I had church, and they got their guard down, and you never know what can happen. So and you can use that to do it. So that's to the right. Well, then you start moving to the left. And I talk about intentional discipleship. So Jesus said we're supposed to go make disciples, but there's a lot of question about how we go do that. Well, we have to be intentional. And intentional discipleship starts with what we call cradle roll. I call the early stage. All the way till the person takes their last breath. They are on a trajectory of discipleship, of constant growth. So we need to be deliberate. And you need to find the methods and the tools to make that happen, and it will fall more into, and I'm going to kind of gloss over some of these, and then we can come back if you have questions. And I'm not trying to, I'm just going to be very frank. I make 25 cents a book, so it's not like I'm trying to make money. If you guys think it's worth buying my books, that way you can go through it. Because I put a lot of this stuff in there, and I make $0.25 a copy. That's a lot of money. Yeah, so I'm not doing. You can get it on Amazon, and I have it on Kindle. It's available on Kindle. I think I got it down to $5. So, intentional discipleship, finding ways to grow people. Intentional discipleship is during your Wednesday evenings. It's in your small groups, because that's another part of it. Is when you go up to the top, when you go to the right, to the second level, what's that one say? Connecting points on the orange. So you move up and you see that connecting points part. That's your small groups. That's your opportunity to reach people where they're at. We'll get to that one in a second. So we go all the way over to the far right on the base, and we have developing leaders and teams. And this really speaks to the pastor. Is to deliberately develop and strengthen your leaders to do the leading and developing strong teams to accomplish the work. So for the first 6 years of ministry, 7, 8 years, got to do it. Nobody else is going to do it. It's got to be mine. I got to tell them what to do. I got to show them how to do it. And then when I left, it's like the old story of the pastor who was determined that the doors on the church should be bright red. So nobody wanted to do it. So he went and painted them bright red. And when he drove off in his U-Haul several years later, they painted the doors back white. It was his vision, not theirs. They could care less. And I've learned that in a couple of congregations I pastored. They didn't really care. And my head elder actually told me this to my face. Herb, a little short dude, 4'10". He looked at me and he said, Pastor, I'm going to tell you, this is in 2003. He said, I've been the head elder here since 1956. I've seen him come and I've seen him go. You can do whatever you want, but I'm just going to change it back when you leave. I'm like, well, at least I know where you stand. So I go to, in 2010, the end of 2010, I didn't want to go, but had the opportunity to go be associate pastor for Dr. Henry Wright. And in the Adventist denomination, especially in the black community, he's considered one of the best Adventist preachers. But he's an even better leader. And he drilled it in my head from the very first go, Omar. Teams. Build your teams. Let your teams own it. Don't drive it. Don't beat it into them. Let them decide it. You got to train your leaders to the vision. You have to disciple your leaders. Let them lead. And he said, because here's the thing. They will be around long after you're gone, and if they didn't own it, it'll never happen. So there's this focus. In fact, you really want to upend how you guys do things in your church? This is a challenge to the pastor, and I'm probably not trying to put you on the spot, but decide that 50% of your board meeting is going to be leadership and team development, strategic visioning, and excitement for the future of where God's going to lead, and then spend the last half of the board meeting on the treasurer's report and all the core things. Always come in and give them nuggets. How can I teach you? How can I help you to grow as disciples? How can I help you to love Jesus more, to serve, to have a servant leadership mentality? How can we spend 5, 7, 8 minutes on doing teamwork? So one of the exercises I like to do at the church, I give them a puzzle. I usually, depending on the size of the congregation, I'll have a puzzle, and I know how many people are going to come, usually, and I'll take that puzzle and I'll break it up and put it in an envelope. And it's random. And so I put it out on I clear the table, and I tell everybody, all right, you all have pieces of the puzzle. Make the puzzle. And they're all trying to, work over each other, and they'll take a few minutes. And then, here's where the fun starts. There's one missing. Hey, you got that? No? Okay, who's hiding that piece of puzzle? And they're looking under the table. I've had, literally, one church, I hit Red Wing, I laughed. They're looking under the table. They're checking. Everybody's getting out of their seat. And I'm doing everything I can not to laugh. Because this is a hard board. But I'm watching them lighten up. And finally, I had my pocket. I pulled out. I said, you guys looking for this? Pastor! I said, this is to let you know that I'm part of it too. And I put it back into place so we could complete the picture. So I challenge to find those opportunities to team build. Okay, so we go over on the base to the far left. What's this one called? The Next Generation. And who's that? That is not Star Trek. It's the young people. And you notice that it connects with intentional discipleship? I got to be really careful what I say here, because you don't know me well enough to know the context of some of the things I say. So if you have a question about it, come see me afterwards, instead of thinking, man, he's nuts. I love our Sabbath school programs for our kids. But oftentimes our Sabbath school programs has been spending more time talking to them about our specific doctrinal beliefs rather than teaching a young child and a young person to trust Jesus with their life. Practical discipleship. They need to learn about, and they will, they need to learn how the narrative of the Bible, the Sabbath and the state of the dead and the sanctuary and prophecy, how this all comes out. But I'm going to tell you, a 6-year-old, 7-year-old doesn't really mean that much to them. And you get a high school kid, I've got an 18-year-old daughter, 19 now, who suffers mental